"Excuse me, what business do you have here? The welfare office is 2 blocks that way." Ethan Cooper's words cut across the gleaming marble lobby of First National Bank like a sudden chill. From behind his teller window, his gaze locked on the black woman approaching his station, his voice steeped in disdain. Dressed sharply in a tailored designer suit, Ariana Lewis paused mid-step, her breath hitching as every head in the midday crowd turned her way. Ethan's smirk widened, basking in the attention. He raised his voice deliberately, ensuring everyone in the lobby heard him. "This is a private financial institution," he said, scanning her appearance with thinly veiled contempt. "We're not a check-cashing shop. You people are always trying to pull some kind of scam, fake checks, fake stories." He jerked his thumb toward the door. "If you're looking for an ATM for your benefits card, it's outside." The room fell into an uneasy hush, broken only by the faint clicks of smartphone cameras quietly capturing the scene. Have you ever been treated like your money doesn't count, solely because of the color of your skin? It was 12:30 in the afternoon. The overhead clock ticked silently above the teller counters. A sign near the front doors read, "Executive Committee Meeting, 1:15 p.m. The branch would close for lunch in half an hour. Nina Desai, a freelance journalist standing a few customers back, angled her phone discreetly to begin a live stream. Her screen lit up, "Discrimination at First National, live." Dear viewer, before we begin, please write in the comments where you are watching from, and support us with a like and a subscribe. Ariana stepped to the counter, laying down her withdrawal slip with composed grace. "I'd like to withdraw $25,000 from my account," she said evenly. Ethan's laugh was loud and derisive. "25,000? Lady, that's more than some people make in a year. What kind of scam is this?" He snatched the paper from the counter, crumpling it in his fist. "Let me guess, you're a CEO? A small business owner? That's what they all say." Though the earlier lunch crowd had thinned, those remaining stood frozen, watching. A well-dressed white woman whispered to her friend, "They should call security." Nearby, an older black man shook his head but said nothing. From her glass office, branch supervisor Laura Bennett approached, the rhythm of her heels echoing across the polished floor. Her face was calm, but the way she aligned herself beside Ethan said everything. "What seems to be the problem, Ethan?" she asked. But her posture made it clear she'd already chosen sides. "This woman's trying to take out a suspicious amount," Ethan said, with the weight of authority. "She claims she has an account here, 25 grand. Laura's brows arched. "That's highly unusual." Turning to Ariana, she added, "Do you have proper identification? For transactions of that size, we'll also need employment verification." Without saying a word, Ariana opened her purse and retrieved her state-issued ID and a platinum First National Bank card, her name embossed in bold silver lettering. Under the bright lobby lights, the card glinted unmistakably. Ethan barely looked at them. "Anyone can get good fake IDs these days," he muttered, lifting the card as if it were evidence. "They're making counterfeits with logos now." Meanwhile, Nina's livestream view count surged past 800. The chat filled with outrage. "Unbelievable. Call the media. Name this bank." Ariana took a steady breath. "I've had this account for 6 years," she said. Her voice never wavered. "Both the ID and card show my account number." Laura took a step closer to Ethan, presenting a united front. "We have strict security protocols," she said smoothly, "particularly for certain types of accounts. They're in place to protect both the bank and our clients from fraud." Her emphasis on certain types hung in the air like a veiled threat. Nina's camera caught the subtle shift, Laura's glance, Ethan's posture, the wall of institutional resistance. The phones, the cold professionalism of racial bias wrapped in banking procedure. Then came the security guard. Marcus Reed stepped from the back hall, a decade of experience written in the lines on his face. He stood tall but uneasy. His presence, though intended to intimidate, betrayed discomfort. He recognized what was happening. "Marcus," Laura said loudly, We may need support with a potential fraud case. Ariana's phone buzzed against her hip. Federal Reserve conference call, 2 p.m. She silenced it. The movement wasn't lost on the audience gathering around her. Ethan sighed dramatically. Lady, you wouldn't believe how often I see this. Sad stories, forged documents, people trying to get cash with charm and attitude. Not going to work here. He gestured to the high ceiling and ornate fixtures. This is First National Bank. We serve real clients. Real money. A man in line muttered, if she's got the ID, give her the damn money. A woman next to him rolled her eyes and nodded in Ethan's direction. He's doing his job. Laura flipped open a thick folder. We'll need full verification of your employment status, she added, her tone now strictly procedural. Income, source of funds, and your intentions for the withdrawal. Ariana remained still, her leather portfolio unopened. Inside were documents for a board meeting that could reshape financial policy across the industry. But to them, she was just another face, another assumption, another target. And behind the counter, Ethan's voice dropped to a murmur as he said, there are some irregularities with this account. Ethan Cooper didn't even blink as he pretended to study his screen. There are multiple red flags here, he announced flatly. We're going to need to perform additional verification procedures. On Nina Desai's screen, the viewer count on her live stream surged past 1,800. The hashtag #BankingWhileBlack had begun trending, spreading rapidly across social media. Screenshots of Ethan's dismissive sneers were already circulating on Instagram and Twitter, turning public sentiment against the bank. Executive committee meeting in 45 minutes. The overhead intercom blared. All department heads, please report to the conference room by 1:10 p.m. The announcement added a ticking clock pressure to the already tense situation. Laura Bennett glanced down at her watch, anxiety creeping into her otherwise polished demeanor. She needed to prepare for the board meeting, but this incident had escalated far too publicly to ignore. Ma'am, she said, her tone clipped and authoritative. You'll need to step aside while we continue processing this account verification. She gestured toward a bench near the security station, less an offer of help and more a pointed order meant to isolate and shame. The suggestion wasn't subtle. It was meant to make Ariana look like a problem, a suspect, not a customer. Marcus Reed, the veteran security guard, shifted where he stood. His body language hinted at discomfort, but his role left little room for protest. He stood silent, bound by protocol. On Nina's screen, the viewer count ticked upward again, past 2,000. The comments section was exploding with messages from people calling out the systemic racism unfolding in real time. What was happening in the bank was no longer private. It had become a national conversation. And still, no one inside the building knew what was about to happen next. Another announcement came over the speakers. Executive meeting in 30 minutes. All managers begin final preparation. The lunch crowd had begun to thin, but Nina's live stream was now approaching 3,400 viewers. Journalists and influencers were sharing clips. Prominent news accounts were beginning to take notice. Then the elevator at the back of the lobby dinged, and out stepped regional manager Alan Park. His designer suit and fast stride made it clear someone had summoned the cavalry. His presence cut through the room like a switch being flipped. What's going on here? He asked, his voice crisp and commanding, honed by 2 decades of crisis management. He scanned the room. A black woman standing alone at the counter, dozens of phones pointed her way, employees stiff with tension. Laura stepped up, explaining the situation in hushed tones, deliberately excluding Ariana from the conversation. She requested a large withdrawal, sir. The documents were flagged by the system, Laura whispered urgently. Ethan noted multiple irregularities. Alan nodded with a furrowed brow, shifting into corporate damage control mode. Ma'am, he said aloud, turning to Ariana with a rehearsed calm. I'm Alan Park, regional manager for this branch. It appears there's been some confusion regarding our verification process. Ariana stood firm, her tone poised but sharpened with resolve. There's no confusion, Mr. Park. I'm simply trying to access my own money. Alan raised his voice slightly, addressing not just her, but the audience gathering around them. Unfortunately, we've seen a rise in sophisticated fraud attempts, identity theft, forged documents, coordinated scams. We must take every precaution. Marcus, still posted near the entrance, stepped forward, lowering his voice. Sir, maybe we should handle this in a more private setting. But Alan waved him off. No, Officer Reed. In matters of security, transparency is essential. The public deserves to see how seriously we take these threats. Nina's comments section exploded. This is racism, plain and simple. Call the media. NAACP needs to see this. This is how they treat black professionals. Her viewer count hit 5,200 and climbing. At that moment, a well-dressed older woman stepped to the counter, her frustration barely concealed. Excuse me, I need to make a deposit before your lunch break. Ethan responded quickly, voice dripping with righteousness. I'm sorry, ma'am. We're currently dealing with a high-risk security matter. This customer is attempting a questionable withdrawal. The woman gave Ariana a wary once-over. Well, she said, you can't be too careful these days. Lots of people trying to take advantage. But then another voice rang out, calm but firm, from the loan officer's desk nearby. A young black man in business attire stood and spoke. This is absurd. She has valid identification and a bank card. What else could she possibly need? Laura turned, defensive. Sir, I must ask you not to interfere. Our security protocols are in place for everyone's protection. The lobby was now fully polarized. Half the customers nodded in agreement with the bank's so-called diligence. The rest looked on, horrified by the obvious prejudice. And Nina was capturing it all. The growing divide, the indignity, the unmistakable dynamics of systemic bias. Alan Park opened a binder thick with forms. We'll need additional documentation, he announced. Proof of employment, tax history, income source, and an affidavit explaining your intent for this withdrawal. Ariana's phone vibrated repeatedly in her purse. Messages flashed across her screen. Her assistant, board members, the Federal Reserve meeting at 2 p.m. One text, from her attorney, read simply, I'm watching. Want me to intervene? But Ariana ignored them all. Her posture remained unshaken, her expression composed, even as the humiliation piled higher. This is standard procedure, Alan said, maintaining the charade. We are protecting both our institution and the rightful account holder. Executive meeting in 20 minutes, the intercom announced. Final preparations commencing. Laura looked at her watch again, anxious now. The situation had dragged far past what she could manage. She needed to be upstairs, but this scene, this ticking time bomb, refused to defuse. And with every passing second, more people were watching. Ma'am, we'll also need to contact your employer to verify your identity, Alan Park added, folding his arms. Who do you work for? The question carried more than curiosity. It carried presumption. In Alan's mind, a woman like Ariana didn't earn wealth. She inherited it, married it, or was faking it. The idea that she could be a self-made executive? Not even on his radar. I run my own company, Ariana replied with effortless calm. Ethan let out a short, mocking laugh. Oh, self-employed. Right. Let me guess, you're a consultant? Maybe a freelance entrepreneur with no actual income? That's what they all say. Meanwhile, Nina's live stream surged past 7,800 viewers. News outlets began embedding the feed on their homepages. A new hashtag First National Discrimination, trended nationwide. People shared their own experiences of banking bias, flooding platforms like wildfire. Marcus Reed approached Ariana hesitantly, his expression tense. Ma'am, I'm going to need to see more identification, driver's license, social security card, any proof of employment. Though his voice was gentle, his uniform forced him into complicity. Ariana handed over the documents without a word. Resistance, she knew, would only deepen their suspicion. Alan gave a nod. Marcus, run those through our fraud prevention systems. Check for irregularities. But there was no sophisticated tool involved, just a delay tactic. Alan was stalling for time, trying to figure out how to handle the growing storm of attention and mobile phone cameras aimed in his direction. A group of young professionals entered the bank and immediately noticed the tension. One woman, a black businesswoman in her 30s, pulled out her phone and began filming. "You're really going to interrogate this woman over her own money?" she said loudly. "It's 2024, not the civil rights era." "Ma'am," Laura interjected quickly, "please don't interfere with bank security procedures. We follow strict protocols." The woman stepped forward. "Show me the policy that requires this level of scrutiny. I've taken out more money than this without anyone asking for my employer's phone number." Laura's cheeks flushed with embarrassment. "We treat all customers the same," she snapped. "This isn't about personal characteristics." But that lie couldn't hide the truth. In plain view, other customers were completing their transactions with no questions asked, while Ariana remained under interrogation for daring to withdraw funds from her own account. Nina's phone was losing battery, but others had started live streams too. There were now multiple feeds running. The story had escaped the bank's marble walls. It was in the hands of the public, civil rights groups, journalists, lawyers. The story had become too big to shut down. Executive committee meeting in 15 minutes. The overhead speaker crackled. All department heads to the boardroom immediately. Then came a new message, this time via Alan's radio. "Mr. Park, corporate legal wants to speak with you. It's about the live stream situation." The call meant one thing. Headquarters had noticed. Damage control was coming late. Too late. Alan turned back to Ariana. "Ma'am, we'll need you to remain here while we complete this verification process," he said coldly. "It may take several hours." The unspoken threat hung in the air. Cooperate with this humiliation or lose access to your own money. Ariana's face didn't flinch. She didn't argue, didn't shout. But something in her stillness made everyone take notice. Even Marcus looked away, unable to meet her eyes. He knew this wasn't right, but his paycheck told him to stay silent. Nina's feed passed 12,400 viewers. Among the flood of comments were names from law firms, finance watchdogs, civil rights attorneys, and newsrooms. The public knew what they were watching, not just a scene of bias, but a defining moment. And then it happened. "Executive meeting in 10 minutes, came the announcement. Ariana slowly unzipped her leather portfolio. Her movements were precise, intentional. Like someone playing the last move of a chess game she'd planned days in advance. The onlookers instinctively leaned closer. Even Nina's chat buzzed with anticipation. Something's coming. She's way too calm. She knows something. From her folder, Ariana pulled a single, elegant business card. She placed it on the counter in front of Ethan, who barely glanced at it before scoffing. "Ariana Lewis, President and CEO of Lewis Financial Group?" He read aloud with mocking disbelief. "Cute. They print these fake cards in bulk online. You can get one for $5. But Alan Park stepped closer and took a second look. His brow furrowed. The weight of the cardstock. The raised lettering. The font. It wasn't cheap. Something about the name Lewis Financial Group pinged faintly in the back of his mind. From briefings, board meetings, shareholder memos. Ariana reached back into her folder and handed him a second card. This one with First National's logo embossed in gold, along with a series of legal titles. Alan's eyes scanned the words, Board of Directors, Preferred Shareholder, Series A Voting Rights. His face drained of color. You're on the board," he stammered, voice now barely audible. Ariana didn't blink. "Not just on the board, Mr. Park," she said, her tone taking on a quiet power that commanded the room's full attention. "Lewis Financial Group holds 31% of First National's parent corporation." Gasps echoed softly around the marble lobby. "We are your largest shareholder." The words didn't just land, they detonated. Ethan's jaw dropped. The business card slipped through his fingers, landing on the polished counter like a grenade. Laura Bennett instinctively stepped back, as if the very air in front of her had become toxic. Around them, the lobby held its breath. Nina's live stream surged, viewer count skyrocketing from 15,600 to over 28,000 in half a minute. The comments rolled faster than her phone could process. She OWNS the bank. Plot twist of the century. This is historic. Across the globe, news outlets embedded the live stream into their homepages. Screenshots flooded social platforms. And Marcus Reed, standing silently at the edge of the scene, finally placed the face. He had seen it before: corporate newsletters, annual shareholder reports, boardroom portraits. The woman they had just spent nearly an hour humiliating was their boss. Their boss's boss. The executive voice behind the biggest name on the building. Ariana calmly opened her leather portfolio. With one hand, she revealed a set of documents that made Ethan's complexion pale. Lewis Financial Group acquired controlling interest in First National Corporation 8 months ago, she said, her tone steady. And that meeting happening upstairs? She nodded toward the boardroom. That's my quarterly shareholder review. The silence in the lobby deepened. Every customer, every employee who had been watching the confrontation now realized they were witnessing something far more than a simple dispute. They were watching a tectonic shift, corporate, cultural, and historical. Nina's live stream didn't miss a beat, capturing every blink, every shift in posture, every broken facade. Her camera documented what was quickly becoming the most expensive customer service failure in the bank's history. This quarter's agenda includes a full audit of customer experience, Ariana continued, withdrawing a thick folder marked confidential, board review. I've spent the last few months visiting branches anonymously, evaluating real-time service. Today's visit? She looked straight at Ethan. A case study. You've provided exceptional insight into our discrimination tracking initiative. The elderly couple near the loan office looked away, their earlier assumptions unraveling. The businessman who had defended Ethan now nervously scrolled through his phone, quietly deleting his social media posts. Even the security cameras overhead seemed to glare down, recording every second of this unraveling disaster. Alan Park fumbled for his radio. All managers, report to the boardroom immediately. Code red. Not a drill. But the damage had already detonated. Nina's live stream reached critical mass, over 38,000 viewers. Hashtags like hashtag bank owner discrimination and hashtag Lewis takedown trended globally. News anchors across networks were live commenting. Industry leaders were watching. At that moment, the bank president's executive assistant appeared at the elevator, her face pale, phone in hand. She had been tracking the storm online. She knew the fallout had just become uncontainable. The Federal Banking Commission was notified 12 minutes ago, Ariana said, tapping her phone. Per compliance regulations, Lewis Financial has a standing mandate to report any suspected bias in real time. She turned her screen to face the room. It displayed contact logs with regulatory agencies. Senator Warren's office is currently monitoring the stream. The House Financial Services Committee is now reviewing this footage. Ethan Cooper looked as if the floor might open beneath him. He'd never once imagined that flagging a customer could trigger a congressional oversight committee. His entire training had been about risk, never about consequences. Ms. Lewis, Alan began, trying to regain corporate footing. Please accept our sincerest apologies. This has clearly been a misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding, Ariana interrupted, her presence now undeniable. This was systemic discrimination, documented, broadcast, and fully visible. She slid another document onto the counter. Under the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, violations like this can carry penalties of up to $500,000 per incident. She wasn't making threats. She was quoting precedent. And under the Community Reinvestment Act, you're legally required to serve all customers equally, without regard to race or socioeconomic status. Her background as a former corporate attorney was now obvious. She didn't just know the rules, She helped write the playbook. She held up her phone again, scrolling through her contacts. Names appeared: former Treasury officials, federal judges, senior congressional staffers. At this moment, she continued, 23 attorneys from our in-house legal division are reviewing every second of Nina's live stream. Every word, every decision, every failure. Across platforms, backup live streams were multiplying. CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, international outlets, they were all in. Banking publications scrambled to piece together the scope of the incident. Ethan finally found his voice, but it cracked under the pressure. Ms. Lewis, I was just doing what we were trained to do. I didn't know. It's all been a huge mistake. Ariana fixed her gaze on him. Show me the part of your training that authorizes racial profiling. Point to the section in your security manual where it says Black customers are to be treated with suspicion by default. Ethan's lips moved, but no answer came. His 12 years of professional experience had collapsed under the weight of a truth he could no longer dodge. Laura Bennett stepped forward, desperate to salvage something. Perhaps this can be resolved internally, Ms. Lewis. I'm sure. This became a public issue the moment you threatened to call law enforcement on a shareholder, Ariana said flatly. Every moment since has been captured for regulatory review. She tapped a financial news app. First National Corporation stock is already down 4.2% in after-hours trading. That's a $340 million drop in market capitalization. The number echoed across the marble lobby like a gavel strike. Ariana continued, and with 89% of social sentiment skewing negative across our brand tags, this isn't just a scandal. It's a market correction in real time. What had started as a humiliation was now a reckoning, and no one, especially not Ethan or Laura, was walking away untouched. Lewis Financial Group's investment strategy prioritizes accountability, particularly in environmental, social, and governance compliance, Ariana stated, her tone clinical now. What happened today constitutes a direct breach of our partnership agreement with First National Corporation. She opened a sealed folder labeled Confidential Divestiture Protocols. Our board has already authorized immediate asset withdrawal if systemic discrimination is confirmed. This livestream, it confirms it in real time. The air shifted. A quiet murmur rippled through the marble lobby as customers grasped the weight of what was unfolding. The elderly woman who had earlier applauded Ethan's diligence now looked horrified. Those who had stood with Ariana earlier, they were capturing history, eyes wide, phone steady. Marcus Reed approached slowly, his expression heavy with conflict. Ms. Lewis, he said quietly, I want to apologize for the part one played in this. I should have seen it for what it was. Officer Reed, Ariana interrupted gently. You were placed in an impossible situation. You did not create this system. Your hesitation showed integrity. That will be reflected in our report. Nina's camera captured the visible relief on Marcus's face, his professionalism recognized, his moral conflict finally acknowledged. Ariana glanced at her phone. Trading algorithms have already picked up the incident, she noted. Investment firms are being alerted about possible ESG violations at First National. She flipped the screen to reveal push notifications from BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street, giants managing trillions in assets. They're watching, and how your institution responds tonight will become the new industry standard for corporate responsibility. Just then, the elevator doors flung open. Bank President Gregory Walsh stormed into the lobby, his usual polished demeanor in disarray. His shirt was wrinkled, hair out of place. He had clearly run from the executive tower. Ms. Lewis, he said, bypassing every subordinate. I want to personally assure you, this incident does not reflect First National's core values. Ariana raised an eyebrow. On the contrary, Mr. Walsh, this incident reflects precisely what Lewis Financial Group has been monitoring across our holdings. Systemic racial bias at the customer level, poor internal training, and leadership that allows discrimination to persist. She opened the final document in her portfolio, A comprehensive audit report stamped with a red board oversight seal. Walsh scanned the pages, his face draining. In the past 6 months, 47 formal complaints of discrimination were filed against your branches, Ariana said. 78% of them involved customers of color. Walsh blinked. The numbers weren't just damning, they were undeniable. Corporate legal teams would spend months, possibly years, trying to contain the fallout. But the real-time damage was already in full swing. Nina's live stream had reached 45,000 viewers. International news outlets had joined the coverage. Financial networks ran banners like "Banking Giant Faces Bias Backlash" and "Live-stream Scandal Sparks Industry Reckoning." Then something unexpected happened, applause. Scattered at first, then building into a wave. Customers clapped, not for the scandal, but for the accountability. For the clarity of truth finally laid bare. They weren't just witnesses anymore. They were part of something historic. Ariana stood with calm confidence, no longer the target of suspicion, but the epicenter of authority. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, addressing the lobby, "this concludes our evaluation of First National's customer service practices." She turned to Walsh. "Shall we now discuss the urgent reforms your institution will implement?" Ethan Cooper, Laura Bennett, and Alan Park didn't move. They stood like museum exhibits, monuments to a culture that had just been exposed. Walsh stepped forward slowly, scanning the shattered remains of the day like a commander surveying a lost battle. He had weathered economic crashes, security breaches, and regulatory inquiries. But nothing had prepared him for this, the real-time collapse of his institution's credibility. "Ms. Lewis," he began again, this time more cautiously, "I would like to personally address this unprecedented situation." Ariana remained behind the teller counter, her open briefcase looking more like a command post than a purse. It held files marked board review, legal proceedings, divestiture planning, documents with the power to topple careers. "Unprecedented moments," she replied, "require unprecedented transparency." She lifted her tablet. It displayed a dashboard of real-time analytics, sentiment trackers, market data, customer retention stats. "Our firm monitors satisfaction ratings across every company we own. Right now, First National ranks dead last, 68% service quality. You are officially the lowest performing brand in our financial portfolio." Nina's feed crossed 52,000 viewers. National anchors now spoke in split screens, side by side with her footage. "This data," Ariana continued, flipping open a file Walsh recognized from quarterly board meetings, "shows the root of the problem." She handed him a report. His hands trembled. 47 confirmed discrimination reports in just half a year. 78% of those targeted customers of color. 63% came from branches where management displayed the exact same bias we witnessed here today. Ethan stood in stunned silence, a man watching his career vanish. Laura gripped her supervisor badge like a child clinging to a toy during a storm. Her authority, once unquestioned, had evaporated. Walsh said nothing. He didn't need to. The evidence spoke louder than any apology, and it was only just beginning. "The financial fallout goes well beyond today's dip in share prices," Ariana said, pulling up another app displaying after-hours trading data. "Lewis Financial Group holds a 31% stake in this institution. That gives us substantial control over governance policies and executive compensation." Gregory Walsh tapped frantically at his own tablet, scrolling through outdated crisis playbooks. None of them had instructions for this level of institutional meltdown. "Miss Lewis," he asked cautiously, "what actions, immediate ones, would signal our genuine commitment to fixing these systemic failures?" "Accountability starts at the root," Ariana replied firmly, gesturing toward the trio of employees who had initiated the harassment. "Ethan Cooper's employment is to be terminated immediately for violating federal anti-discrimination statutes. Laura Bennett will be placed on administrative leave pending an investigation into her failure of supervisory duty. As for Alan Park," She flipped through legal documents that made Walsh's expression tighten. His history with unresolved discrimination complaints across multiple branches makes a full review of his regional management position not only appropriate, but necessary. Alan's face turned gray. He knew what this meant. Regional managers tied to patterns of bias rarely got second chances, especially in high-stakes institutions under national scrutiny. The Community Reinvestment Act requires that federally insured banks serve all communities without bias. Ariana continued, every word crisp and backed by legal precision. Today's events, when placed alongside our existing data, constitute what federal oversight defines as pattern and practice discrimination. Walsh's phone lit up with calls from legal counsel, regulators, and board members, all of whom had already seen the live stream. Every passing minute added another layer of liability. Nina's camera didn't miss a moment. It caught the exact instant Walsh realized this wasn't just a public relations nightmare. It was a threat to the very survival of his bank. Lewis Financial Group is connected to institutional investors managing over $2 trillion in assets, Ariana said, holding up a screen with notifications from BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street. They are all watching how this unfolds. It was no idle warning. If those firms followed Lewis's lead and began selling off shares, First National could face a market collapse that would take years to repair. Our environmental, social, and governance evaluations influence capital movement across our entire investment ecosystem, Ariana said. This event, a clear breach of corporate responsibility. She laid another set of papers across the counter. Walsh recognized the formatting, regulatory filings, notifications already submitted. Under federal law, civil rights violations must be reported immediately. Our compliance division sent initial disclosures to the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, and the Federal Reserve, over 40 minutes ago. Nearby, Marcus Reed stood straight-backed, observing the transformation of power. Where once he had been silent out of fear, now he stood in vindication. His quiet resistance had become an act of professional principle. This situation requires specific corrective actions, Ariana said, unfolding what was clearly a pre-prepared action plan. First, terminate all employees involved in today's incident. Full investigations into their prior conduct must be completed. Estimated cost, $200,000. Walsh nodded slowly, trying to keep up. Second, she continued, mandatory anti-bias training for all customer-facing staff within 60 days. That's 40 hours of certification with yearly renewals. Implementation will cost approximately $12 million system-wide. Third, build a real-time discrimination alert system powered by artificial intelligence. It will analyze staff-customer interactions, flagging potential bias patterns as they emerge. Initial development cost, $45 million. Annual upkeep, $8 million. Walsh's fingers hovered over his screen as the numbers auto-calculated. The costs were staggering, but they were nothing compared to what would happen if he failed to act. Fourth, Ariana said, create an independent civil rights ombudsman. This role will report directly to your board, not to bank leadership. They'll be empowered to investigate bias incidents and enforce immediate policy corrections. Annual budget, $5 million. She was not done. Fifth, she said firmly, establish a community reinvestment fund totaling $25 million. It will support minority-owned businesses and financial education programs. Because real equity goes beyond damage control. Nina's livestream captured it all. Thousands of people watching as a major financial institution was held to account in real time. Comments came in from across the industry. This is historic. This is the new standard. This is how change begins. Our timeline is non-negotiable, Ariana said, her tone final. Lewis Financial's board meets tomorrow. If we are satisfied with First National's response, the partnership continues. If not, she tapped her tablet. Then we begin immediate divestment of our $1.2 billion stake. Walsh paled. Her screen showed pre-market forecasts already adjusting in anticipation. Algorithms were pricing an investor retreat. If she pulled out, others would follow. Total projected investor withdrawal, $3.8 billion, Ariana said plainly. Your credit rating will plummet. Your regulatory standing will collapse. And so will your institution. Ethan Cooper suddenly stepped forward, desperation bleeding through the last of his arrogance. Miss Lewis, please. I've got 2 children. A mortgage. I was just doing my job. I didn't know. Show me the section in your bank policy that authorizes racial profiling, Ariana challenged, her voice unwavering. Cite the training material that tells your employees to assume black customers are criminals. Ethan's lips moved, but no sound came. He had nothing. Of course, no such directive existed, because federal law strictly forbids exactly what he had been practicing, unchecked, for years. Laura Bennett tried a last-ditch defense. Ma'am, we were simply following standard security protocols for large withdrawals. I've withdrawn larger sums from this same branch, Ms. Bennett, Ariana replied calmly, without so much as a second glance. The only difference this time was my skin tone. Nina's live stream showed a viewer count nearing 67,000. International banking publications were already writing early analyses on the incident's legal implications. Across the Atlantic, European Union officials began referencing it in conversations about U.S. banking oversight. Ariana continued, consulting federal guidelines. The Federal Reserve requires all member banks to demonstrate compliance with community reinvestment obligations. If a pattern of discriminatory conduct is found, the penalties include full operational review, up to and including charter revocation. Gregory Walsh checked the time again. Legal teams were waiting. Regulatory agencies were calling. And standing before him, armed with undeniable leverage, was the bank's largest shareholder, demanding more than apologies. At Lewis Financial Group, we believe in rehabilitation over destruction, Ariana said. Her tone was firm but measured, her posture suggesting a path forward, if the bank was willing to take it. We're ready to help First National become a leader in inclusion. But that requires authentic accountability, not token reforms crafted to dodge liability. There it was, a quiet ultimatum with more force than any threat. Economic power was achieving what decades of protests and lawsuits had struggled to do: demand structural change from within. Walsh knew what the next 24 hours meant. Either First National would evolve, or it would go down in history as a cautionary tale of corporate blindness. 24 hours later, he stood before the board in First National's executive conference room. The mahogany table was silent. The air was tense. Some directors had flown across the country to hear his response to the Lewis ultimatum. Ladies and gentlemen, he began. First National accepts full responsibility for the discriminatory incident that occurred yesterday. We are enacting sweeping, immediate reforms. Nina's livestream had passed 3.2 million total views. The hashtag bank owner reveal had dominated social feeds for over 18 hours, sparking a global conversation about racial bias in financial systems. Effective immediately, Walsh announced, Ethan Cooper has been terminated. Our internal review revealed a long-standing pattern of discriminatory behavior, 34 formal complaints over 7 years, none of which were properly addressed. Human Resources records confirmed what Ariana had exposed, that minority customers were consistently subjected to extra verification, steps not applied to white patrons. At the head of the table, Ariana Lewis sat, no longer merely a shareholder, but a commanding presence whose authority no one dared question. And Laura Bennett? She asked without raising her voice. Dismissed, Walsh replied, for managerial negligence and enabling discriminatory behavior. She failed to act when bias was evident. Alan Park had already submitted his resignation. The findings tied to his regional leadership had revealed systemic problems across multiple branches, trends that couldn't be ignored. Our board has unanimously approved implementation of the Lewis reform package, Walsh continued. We've allocated $67 million for the first year alone. It was a massive investment, but everyone knew the alternative, regulatory penalties, lawsuits, mass investor exodus, would be far more costly. Marcus Reed entered the room wearing a new title on his badge, Director of Compliance and Customer Advocacy. His promotion had been swift and unanimous. His integrity during the incident had become the foundation of the bank's future. Our bias training program begins Monday across all 342 locations, Marcus reported. Every frontline employee will complete 40 hours of mandatory training within 60 days, including modules on implicit bias, de-escalation, and anti-discrimination law. Nina Desai, whose phone had changed banking history, now stood at the front of the room as the bank's new director of external communications. Her grassroots journalism background made her uniquely qualified to ensure transparency and rebuild public trust. The artificial intelligence system begins beta testing next week, Nina added. It will analyze real-time customer interactions, flagging potential bias for immediate supervisor review. The technology, funded by Lewis Financial Group, was built to detect tone shifts, trigger words, and escalation risks in real time, adding a new layer of accountability. And finally, Walsh said, Dr. Porter has accepted our offer to serve as independent civil rights ombudsman. A former Justice Department attorney with an unimpeachable record, Dr. Porter would report directly to the board. She would hold the authority to investigate claims, terminate employees, and rewrite policies as needed. Her appointment sent shockwaves through the financial world. Dr. Porter, known for her relentless advocacy for civil rights, had been chosen to lead First National's new compliance division. Her name alone signaled this wasn't just a rebrand. It was a fundamental restructuring. A line in the sand. The $25 million community fund launches immediately, Ariana noted, scanning implementation timelines. Low-interest loans for minority-owned businesses and comprehensive financial literacy programs will begin this quarter. But the impact didn't stop with First National. Competing banks, seeing which way the wind was blowing, began implementing similar reforms, preemptively adapting, aware that Lewis's scrutiny might soon turn their way. Gregory Walsh delivered the next update carefully. The Federal Reserve, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, and the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency have all commended our rapid action. They're now monitoring our progress as a potential blueprint for industry-wide reform. What had started as a crisis had become a case study in corporate redemption. First National's stock not only rebounded, it soared to new record highs. Investors, sensing the shift, viewed the bank's transformation as proof that social accountability and profitability weren't opposites. They were aligned. And when Lewis Financial Group chose to increase its investment rather than pull back, the message was clear. This bank was not only salvageable, it was leading the charge toward an inclusive financial future. In 6 months, Ariana announced at a board meeting, we will evaluate these reforms. Continued partnership depends on verifiable outcomes, not promises. And this time, everyone knew she meant it. The standards Ariana demanded weren't for headlines. They were measurable, enforceable, and backed by capital. Nina Desai's live stream had sparked more than just outrage. It ignited congressional hearings on banking discrimination. And in those hearings, First National was held up not as the villain, but as the proof that when customers hold banks accountable, change becomes possible. Market-based pressure drives faster reform than regulation alone, Ariana said during a Harvard Business School interview. When injustice becomes expensive, institutions start evolving. A quiet revolution had succeeded, fueled not by litigation, but by live streams, stock prices, and boardroom decisions. 1 year later, Ariana took the stage at the Global Banking Equality Summit. She addressed delegates from nearly 50 nations. In this industry, she said, dignity is not a negotiable service. When we demanded better, we didn't just change one bank. We built a model that now protects millions of customers worldwide. The numbers proved it. Across institutions that adopted Lewis standards, banking discrimination complaints dropped by over 50%. Minority business lending rose by 34%. Financial institutions weren't just reacting, they were competing to show inclusion. Nina Desai's documentary, Owning Justice, A Banking Revolution, premiered at the Cannes Film Festival. It won the Palme d'Or for Best Documentary. The story of one live stream had grown into a movement. One smartphone changed everything, Nina said in interviews. It showed the world that anyone, anywhere, can expose the truth and demand change. The Lewis Equality Fund had distributed over $127 million in business loans. More than 8,400 jobs had been created in communities once shut out by discriminatory practices. Marcus Reed, once a quiet security guard forced to follow flawed orders, now stood on stages across the country. As a corporate compliance director, his lived experience made him an invaluable advisor on dismantling bias before it ever took root. Economic consequences speak louder than moral lectures, Ariana reminded a class at Stanford's Graduate School of Business. That's how we make equity scalable. Federal agencies soon adopted Lewis's framework as best practice. The Department of Justice cited First National's transformation as proof that strategic accountability works faster than court battles. The ripples kept spreading. Ethan Cooper, once the embodiment of systemic arrogance, completed bias retraining. He now worked for a small credit union, speaking openly about his failures, helping others recognize their own unconscious prejudice. His humility, hard-earned, had become part of the new industry playbook. Every time a customer was treated with respect, regardless of their race, background, or clothing choice, the legacy of that day at First National lived on. The Lewis model had expanded beyond banking. Healthcare systems, retail chains, and hotel groups adopted similar economic leverage strategies. Investors realized inclusion is not only right, it is profitable. Ariana's final words at the summit were simple but powerful. Real stories create real power. When we document injustice and demand accountability with precision, we build the future our communities have always deserved. Thank you for watching. Subscribe me and hit the notification bell to not miss new stories. Bye.